Okay. I'm Michael Kern, principal of Michael Kern Consulting, LLC, also affiliate faculty at the University of Washington and Washington State University. I'm joined by my colleague and co-author Amanda Murphy, who is a senior facilitator and associate professor of extension at Washington State University and the William D. Ruckelhaus Center. We're presenting our paper, What Do You Expect? Assessing Whether a Situation is Ripe for Collaborative Governance. So the article begins by reviewing how key scholars have framed collaborative governance as a response to public policy challenges becoming more complex and exceeding the ability of individual agencies or government as a whole to successfully address on their own. There are many terms used in the literature to describe different types of collaborative processes, such as partnerships, coalitions and networks, co-management, cross-sector collaboration, public-private partnerships, environmental conflict resolution, etc. You can see a bunch of them on the screen here. Scholars in public administration, political science, and other fields, particularly in the United States, but also elsewhere, are using the term collaborative governance to describe these processes. In our article, we pointed particularly to these definitions I have on the screen, which build on one another and add important ideas. The article then discusses justifications, merits, and critiques of collaborative governance. Both research and practice have explored the benefits and drawbacks of these collaborative governance processes. This slide shows a summary of the justifications and merits, and I'll click through a few of them here that you can read in more detail in the article. I don't have time to walk through them in this very quick summary, but the article does go through them. Similarly, the article goes through a series of critiques of collaborative governance, the scholarship describing the potential or observed drawbacks and adverse effects. So I will go through adding those onto the screen, which I won't have time to go through in detail. We mentioned these many types of collaborative processes, these merits and critiques, to establish the importance of assessing ripeness. And it may be that these merits rise to the fore when a process is initiated and sustained under a favorable set of conditions, and that the critiques become warranted when this isn't the case. So therefore, it's imperative to carefully explore and evaluate current conditions before initiating a collaborative governance process. In general, researchers and practitioners agree that there are conditions that, if present at the onset, will influence a successful collaborative governance process. And I'll put up a number of researchers that we included in the paper who've done just that. Emerson and Abachi identified 4 conditions, Matejcic et al., 20 factors in 6 categories, for example. Again, I won't review them all, but they are assembled in the paper. There's also these concepts of ripeness and readiness that are crucial to peace and conflict studies. And seek to explain why and when parties in conflict decide to attempt resolution. Zartman talks about the mutually hurting stalemate, that parties resolve their conflict only when they're ready to do so, and when alternative or usually unilateral means are blocked and the parties feel that they're in an uncomfortable and costly predicament. This is a classic theory, but it's also subject to a number of critiques, which has led to readiness as an alternative, which differs in that it uses variables rather than necessary states and focuses on the thinking of one rather than both parties. And readiness allows the parties to be motivated differently than other parties. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Amanda to talk to you about stages of collaborative decision-making and take us through some other parts of the paper.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. So as Michael mentioned, there is a need to determine whether a situation is ripe or ready for a collaborative process. And so this is why practitioners in the field of collaborative governance often begin by assessing a situation to determine whether there are some key requisite conditions in place or potentially they're existing in order for a collaborative process to succeed. And so this is why an assessment, often called a situation assessment or a conflict assessment, is really the first stage and kind of phase of a collaborative process. And so here we have, this is a visual that a colleague of mine in a paper that we produced where we really lay out in detail the different steps and kind of key stages of a situation assessment. And so as I mentioned before, these are often, we refer to them in practice as a situation assessment, a conflict assessment. And you can see right there as we get down into really the fourth stage where we're analyzing and assessing, that is where we are looking at whether or not those key conditions are in place in order for the situation to really be ripe and have the potential for success. So in doing this, we are looking at, as you can see, some key conditions. So the Center for Collaborative Policy at California State in Sacramento, they have identified these 11 conditions. They're often phrased as questions, and they are really what us practitioners in the field are using when we are assessing the favorability, or whether or not to initiate a collaborative process. And also in our paper, we do provide an example that when we walk through in the paper in detail in that example of just how those conditions that were there on the previous slide, how practitioners, how we apply those in conducting a situation assessment. Again, I'm not going to go into that, but it really walks it through in the paper how we use those conditions and how we kind of determined whether or not collaboration would be successful for this example. And so the paper then also discusses how, for us at the Ruckelhaus Center over many years of practice, we've learned that it's not uncommon to determine that while the parties that come to us that are really interested in initiating a collaborative process, how they often have in mind a more general definition of what collaboration is. So they're interested in a collaborative process, but potentially not in the way in which more of a collaborative governance process. So for example, we often are approached by individuals, and really what they have in mind is more of an advocacy-based partnership, or maybe a desire to create a more like-minded coalition, where what they want to do is bring people together to really pursue a common aim or create some unity around one idea or one interest in the hopes of building kind of a more effective or more stronger, they want a mutually agreed upon solution, but they are really interested in bringing people together to agree on their solution or what they, are really focused on. And so we've come to believe that it's really important to determine whether or not this is the case. And therefore we have proposed a 12th condition be added to these conditions in which practitioners are looking at and evaluating when conducting a situation assessment. And so that condition here up on the slide, that the initiators and supporters are open to a process resulting in a range of outcomes and solution sets. Another way to think about this is in terms of the dual concerns model. We talk a little bit about this in the paper, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But it is that dual concerns model. So when the parties, when there's concern about both their own and the other party's outcomes, that's really encouraging problem solving strategies. So when individuals are coming into the process and they're interested in what they want to get out of it, as well as interested in the other party, which is different than when parties, when they're only concerned about their own outcomes. And that often encourages contending. So again, when only interested in their own outcomes, wanting more of kind of an advocacy-based kind of coalition, these are some of the things that we're looking at. I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to talk a little bit about that 12th condition that we proposed in the paper. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so just to wrap things up, to help practitioners assess that new condition, we've proposed a question that can be asked during those assessments of those interested in initiating a collaborative governance process. And you can see that question on the screen. It's a simple question. Do you expect that the results of the collaborative process you're interested in initiating will be that others realize the solution you currently favor is the correct one? This simple question about expectations can make explicit the difference between partnerships, coalitions, and collaborations, where parties stand in the dual concern model, and help parties better understand their priorities and process needs. And if you spend time reading the paper, you can learn more about our thoughts on why this simple question can accomplish all those different things. But in the interest of time now, I'm just going to take us to our discussion slide where when we have more time, we like to get feedback on a couple of different questions. But for now, I'm just going to put up some contact information so that if you are interested, you could get a hold of us and we could have a conversation. And at the very least, you've got a link to where you can find this article if you would like to spend some time with it. So thank you very much. And thank you for the time.